Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a crucial piece of economic analysis. It's the Assessment of Logistics Cost in India report.
That's right, it's a big one from NCAER and DPIIT. Basically, they're trying to pin down a number everyone's been guessing about for years. How much does it really cost to move goods around India and what's driving that cost? It's key for trade competitiveness.
Absolutely. And this isn't just an academic exercise, it's tied directly to policy, isn't it? The National Logistics Policy, the NLP 2022.
Precisely. That policy has some, pretty ambitious goals. They want to slash logistics costs to global levels by 2030.
Okay.
And get India into the top 25 on the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index, the LPI, again by 2030. Plus, create a solid data foundation for all future planning. This report is meant to be the bedrock for that.
So, our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack how they got their numbers and what it all means. They used a pretty interesting mix, a hybrid approach.
Yeah, it's quite robust. They didn't just rely on surveys, though they did plenty of those, talking to like 3,000 logistics providers and 500 users.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. But they grounded it in solid government data, too. Things like the supply and use tables, national account statistics. The idea was to build a framework they can actually repeat year after year, not just a one-off estimate.
Makes sense. Credibility is key here. So what's the big number, the headline figure everyone's talking about?
Okay, the total logistics cost TLC for 2023-24, they've estimated it at 24.01 lakh crore.
24 lakh crore. That's a huge number to wrap your head around. How does that translate in terms of the overall economy?
Right, context matters. So as a share of total GDP, it comes out to 7.97%. But the number they really emphasize, the one they argue is more meaningful for tracking progress and comparing internationally.
Is the cost as a percentage of non-services output?
Exactly. That figure is 9.09% for 2023-24.
Okay, let's pause there. Why is that 9.09% number considered better than the GDP one? Why focus on non-services output?
Well, think about India's economy. Services make up a massive chunk, right? About 65% of GDP. But most services don't involve physically moving large quantities of stuff around. They don't have huge transport or warehousing costs in the same way.
Ah, okay, so using total GDP kind of waters down the impact.
Precisely. It makes the burden look smaller than it actually is for the sectors that do rely heavily on logistics, farming, mining, manufacturing. If you want to compare India to, say, Germany or China, or just track if we're getting more efficient over time in moving goods, you need to isolate the cost on those goods-producing sectors. The 9.09% gives you that clearer picture.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So using that 9.09% baseline, are we seeing things get better? Are initiatives like PM Gati Shakti actually making a dent?
Well, the early signs in this report are actually quite positive. They looked at the trend over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
The total logistics cost, the TLC, grew at a CAGR, that's compound annual growth rate, at 7.58% between 2021-22 and 2023-24.
7.58%. And how does that compare to the growth of the stuff being moved, the non-services output?
That's the key comparison. The non-services output grew faster, at a CAGR of 10.61% over the same period.
So costs are going up, but the value of goods being produced and moved is going up faster. That's efficiency gain right there.
Exactly. The logistics intensity is actually decreasing, relatively speaking. And what makes it really interesting, maybe even surprising, is that this happened even while fuel costs were shooting up. High-speed diesel, HSD, is a huge part of logistics expenses. The wholesale price index for HSD increased quite a bit during that time.
So despite that headwind, the overall system got more efficient. That does suggest the infrastructure push, the policy changes, they're starting to bite.
It strongly implies that yes, things like better roads, faster port clearances, maybe the digital initiatives under the NLP seem to be helping optimize things, absorbing some of those external cost shocks.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's look at the demand side, the companies actually paying for these logistics. What did the surveys find about who bears the biggest burden? Does size matter?
Oh, it matters hugely. This was one of the standout findings, I think. Small firms, the really small ones with turnover up to 5 crore, they face the highest relative cost.
How high are we talking?
Get this, 16.9% of their output value goes into logistics.
16.9%. That's enormous. And how does that compare to the big players?
It's a stark contrast. Large firms, those with turnover over 250 crore, their logistics cost share is the lowest. It averages just 7.6%.
Wow. So more than double the relative cost for small firms compared to large ones, a difference of over 9 percentage points.
Exactly. That's not just a small economy of scale effect. That's a massive structural gap. It tells you why MSMEs, the small and medium enterprises, find it so hard to compete, especially globally. They just can't achieve the same efficiencies.
They don't have the volume for dedicated transport deals, maybe lack sophisticated warehousing.
Right. They're often relying on fragmented third-party logistics, paying higher per-unit costs. Large firms can build integrated supply chains, optimize inventory, maybe even have their own fleets, or negotiate bulk discounts. That 9-point gap is a real policy target.
Does the type of product being shipped also make a big difference?
It does, yeah. Some sectors inherently have higher costs. The highest share reported was in transport equipment. Think cars, machinery parts, large, heavy, sometimes awkward items. Their logistics cost was 21.4% of output value.
Oof, it's high.
Very. Also high were things like textiles and apparel, agricultural products. Pharmaceuticals may be needing special handling or temperature control.
Yeah.
On the lower end, you had chemicals and cement, often moved in bulk. And cement especially uses a lot of rail, which helps keep costs down.
That's a perfect lead-in to the supply side, the actual cost of different transport modes. We know road freight and warehousing are the biggest chunks of that total 24 lakh crore bill. But how do the modes compare on efficiency? You mentioned rail being cheaper for cement. Let's look at the PTPK numbers.
Right, PTPK per ton per kilometer. That's the standard way to compare. Air is, unsurprisingly, the most expensive by far. Yeah. 72 per ton per kilometer.
Okay, no shock there.
Road, the most common mode, averages 3.78. Waterways come in cheaper on average at 2.30. And rail is the most cost-effective for the actual hauling part, 1.96 PTPK.
1.96 for rail versus 3.78 for road. That sounds like a huge advantage for rail, but there's a catch, isn't there? Why isn't everything moving by rail if it's that much cheaper?
You hit it exactly.
Yeah.
That 1.96 is mainly for bulk cargo, moving from one major terminal to another. It doesn't include the first mile, the last mile, getting it to and from the station. And look what happens when you move smaller stuff, parcels, by rail. The cost explodes.
How much?
The average PTPK for rail parcels jumps to 12.40.
1240. Why such a massive difference?
Because for parcels, almost half the cost, 44%, isn't the basic freight charge. It's listed as other charges. That covers things like vendor fees, handling, administrative overheads, profit margins for intermediaries, all the stuff involved in collecting, sorting, and delivering smaller packages. It shows a big inefficiency in the system around rail for non-bulk goods.
Right, so the core rail infra might be efficient, but the ecosystem around it for smaller goods adds huge costs. That's a critical point for making rail more attractive. Now back to road, the dominant player at 3.78 PTPK, fuel is the biggest slice, 42.1%. What's the other big driver?
It's the fixed annual costs, things you pay whether the truck moves or not. Permits, insurance, maintenance, salaries, EMI on the truck itself, that accounts for another 40.5%. Almost as much as fuel.
So those fixed costs create pressure to keep trucks moving and ideally full both ways.
Absolutely, which leads to another point: scale efficiency within road transport. Just like with firm size, truck size matters enormously. Small, light trucks, the report calls them low axle. They're the most expensive to operate per ton kilometer euro, 11.03 PTPK.
11 rupees. That's even higher than the average road cost.
Way higher. Now, compare that to the biggest trucks, the heavy-duty multi-axle trailers, say 55-tonners. Their PTPK is incredibly low, 1.51.
151. That's even cheaper than rail's bulk cost.
It is. This tells you very clearly where infrastructure needs to focus. We need more highways capable of handling these super efficient large trailers safely and quickly. Shifting freight to larger trucks offers a massive, immediate cost-saving potential for the economy.
And the report also mentioned regional differences in road costs, higher costs going to the Northeast.
Yes, consistently higher costs for Northeast-bound cargo. The Western region, conversely, tends to have lower costs. It often comes down to backhaul.
Explain backhaul for us. Why is it tougher in the Northeast?
Sure. Backhaul is just getting a paying load for the return trip. If a truck goes from Delhi to Mumbai, the trucker needs a load from Mumbai back to Delhi to make money on the whole round trip.
Yeah.
In the West, there's lots of industry, so finding that return load is usually easier. The Northeast has less industrial outbound traffic and geographical challenges.
Yeah.
So trucks often deliver goods there and have to come back empty.
And that cost of the empty return leg gets added to the price of the initial delivery to the Northeast.
Exactly. It inflates the freight rates for that region.
Okay, what about waterways? Average PTPK of 2.30, but you mentioned a split?
Yeah, big difference between coastal shipping, which is quite efficient at 1.80 PTPK.
Cheaper than rail.
And inland water transport, IWT,
Right.
which is much higher at 3.30 PTPK.
Why is inland water so much more expensive than coastal?
Again, it's often about volume and dedicated routes versus more fragmented traffic. Coastal uses big ships on established sea lanes. Inland waterways, while promising, sometimes face challenges like one-way demand. The report used the example of Haldia to Pandu on the Brahmaputra. Maybe lots of cargo wants to go up the river, but not much wants to come down. So barges end up returning empty, driving up the average cost for the loaded leg.
Right, the empty backhaul problem again, but on water this time. Okay, this brings us to a really critical point. The multimodal challenge. Getting goods off the road, onto rail or water for the long haul, then back onto road for the last bit. The report looked at the break-even point, right?
Yes, this is super important for planning things like multimodal logistics parks, MMLPs. When does it actually become cheaper to switch modes rather than just stick with a truck door to door? They modeled it out. Scenario 1. Assume your first and last mile road legs are short, say 50 kilometers each.
Okay, pretty efficient transfer.
In that case, the break-even distance is around 600 kilometers total journey length. So for trips longer than 600 kilometers, using rail for the middle 500 kilometers becomes cheaper than just trucking it the whole way.
600 kilometers, that sounds achievable for many routes. But what happens if those road connections to the rail terminal are longer?
Well, the picture changes quite a bit. If those first and last mile road legs double to 100 kilometers each, then the fixed costs of handling the cargo at the terminals, plus the extra road cost, push the break-even point way out. It goes up to about 1,000 kilometers total distance, with maybe 800 kilometers on rail.
1,000 kilometers, that's a significant hurdle.
It is. It explains why, even for a long route like Delhi to Mumbai that's around 1,400 kilometers, trucks still dominate. Even if the per kilometer cost on rail is lower, the hassle factor, the documentation, and crucially, those fixed costs of transferring the goods twice means road often wins out for simplicity and overall cost, unless the distance is really substantial or the MMLP is incredibly efficient.
So making those transfer points, the MMLPs, cheaper and faster, is absolutely critical to shifting more cargo to rail.
Absolutely paramount. Reduce the friction costs at the nodes.
Let's quickly touch on the non-transport costs. Warehousing makes up nearly a quarter of the total logistics bill. What drives costs there?
It's quite variable. Location, obviously city center warehouse costs more than one out of town, and the type of facility matters a lot. The average cost they found was around €30 per square foot per month.
Okay.
But if you need specialized storage, like temperature controlled for food or medicines, the cost basically doubles. It jumps to nearly €58.50 per square foot per month.
And what's the biggest operational cost inside the warehouse?
Interestingly, it's manpower. Labor account for about 30% of warehousing costs. That suggests automation, better training, process optimization. Those could be big levers for cost reduction in the future.
Right. Finally, eke some of the costs involved in exports and imports, mostly through seaports, since that's where 95% of volume goes. What stood out there?
A couple of things. One is the difference between standard predictable charges like THC, terminal handling charge, and the variable, often unpredictable ones like demurrage or detention fees if things get delayed. But maybe more revealing is the markup.
Markup.
Yeah. The study points out that the final price the shipping line charges the customer for port-related services is often significantly higher than what the port terminal actually charges the shipping line. There are intermediary margins being added in the chain.
The cost cascade effect. Do they give an example?
They do. For moving a standard container, a TEU from JNP, that's Navasheva Port near Mumbai, to an inland depot near Delhi using road transport. For an import container, the total cost is roughly 1 intra-hour. About 70K of that is the road transport, and 30K is port costs, handling, maybe some duties folded in.
1 lakh rupees for one container, port to Delhi.
Yep. For an export container going the other way, it's a bit cheaper, around 89,000 total, maybe 65K for transport and 24K for the port side. These are the real costs businesses are dealing with when trading internationally. Okay, so pulling all this together, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener? I mean, the major achievement here seems to be just having a credible number finally. That 7.97% of GDP, or more importantly, the 9.09% of non-services output.
Absolutely. Moving from guesswork to an evidence-based framework is huge. It's like turning the lights on. And it's not just one number. The details are actionable. You see the huge cost gap for small firms. You see the inefficiency of small trucks. You see the 1,000-kilometer break-even point for multimodal.
Right. It gives policymakers, PM Gati Shakti planners, specific bottlenecks to target. Where do you get the biggest bang for your buck in investment? It seems clearer now.
Exactly. Focus on those first last-mile connections, facilitate larger truck usage, streamline parcel handling for rail, address regional imbalances like the Northeast backhaul issue.
And the plan is to make this a regular thing, an annual logistics cost index, or LCI.
That's the goal, to institutionalize this measurement process so we can track progress against those NLP targets consistently, year after year. You can't manage what you don't measure, right? Makes perfect sense. So, as you think about what these costs mean for your business or for the economy overall, here's a final thought to consider. This study used surveys and historical data. But imagine the future. What happens when we can integrate real-time data?
Ooh, like from e-way bills, FASTag, GSTN.
Exactly. What if the logistics cost index could become almost dynamic, tracking efficiency near instantly across specific routes, specific modes, specific commodities? What level of optimization could that unlock for India's competitiveness? It could be a complete game changer on the global stage.